doesn't wear excessive jewelry or makeup or excessive clothing. She's always understated in appearance. She raises her pant leg and displays the few transparent hairs sprinkled sparsely on her calf. See? There's no need to do it. I've never shaved my legs in my life, she says, chronically triumphant. This, to her, is proof that my 14-year-old body doesn't need the kiss of a razor. If you cut it, it doesn't grow, she insists. I believe her. I believe everything she says because I'm 14 and she's the only one I trust, and all I want is for her to love me. This is my grandmother, my father's mother. I call her Mochita. She has been described in many ways and languages, but don't ever make the mistake of relating her to my mother. That, to her, would be a discourteous blunder, and she would deny the association. My father is the unbreakable thread that unites her with me. To her, my mother was merely the incubation chamber I was ejected from the day I was born, and that may have been the happiest day of her life. Mochita and I walk from her Soviet-era concrete block apartment to the bus station. It's the summer of 2006 in a small Lithuanian town, her ancestral home. She's talking, weaving in and out of conversation with herself about the state of affairs in the world and the neighborhood. She makes no distinction between the two, and I hang on to every syllable. The woman behind the kiosk sees us every day but gives no signs of recognition. She hands Mochita 2 tickets. We sit side by side in the skeleton of a bus that creaks and groans like a combat veteran. It's been in service since 1991, the year Lithuania reclaimed independence from the Soviet Union. That year, buses like this one stood in a line around the television tower in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and positioned themselves in front of the Soviet tanks. It was a hard year for everybody, especially the buses. Loud music blasts from the seat behind us. A teenage boy rebelling against the state of an obligatory youthful anguish turns the volume on his phone to its highest setting. She turns around in her seat and begins her tirade. I have a migraine. If you had any respect for your elders, you'd turn it down. He ignores her. That's the problem with your generation. People like you, they don't. I sit back and I watch her continue her sermon, embarrassed but grateful. I'm the one suffering a migraine, and she knows. Mochita won't tell me she loves me, but she does fight the world on my behalf. It's her ultimate tenderness. If you sat in Mochita's kitchen years ago, you'd see her do it the same way each time. When she wasn't cleaning, cooking, or fussing over me, she'd peek her blonde white head out of the wide, lace-curtained window to keep tabs on the others. It was her duty to make sure the neighborhood was functioning properly. She'd be on patrol. Were the junkies still high and docile? Were the kids playing nicely, or did they need a shout to remind them someone was always watching? Whose husband was coming home drunk, smelling morose for the 3rd night this week? If it happened outside her window, Mochita would see it. She would call me in from playtime with the neighborhood kids and say, time for lunch. We both knew that was our code word for my biggest secret. She knew that every afternoon at 1 p.m., the Teletubbies were on. I loved the Teletubbies with a devoted reverence, but everybody knew I was too old to watch them. But every day, she would stick her head out of the window and call me in to lunch. She dutifully denied it was ever anything more than that. She's an expert observationalist, but her dedication lies in gossip work. She has enough character to fill every Lithuanian bus route with busy-bodied passion, but instead it directs the majority of her attention toward me. 2 years ago, Mochita was preparing dinner and chatting to nobody in particular about the neighbors. When she was done, she placed the plate onto the kitchen table in front of me and delivered one final note of gossip, this time about my mother's side of the family. "You have a brother, you know," she said. I froze. A brother? It was the first time I'd ever seen her pause before speaking. "You must have known. Somebody must have told you. She must have told you." This information paralyzed me. I'd spent years believing her, trusting every word that left her mouth, absorbing everything with a panicked thirst. In our conversations at the very same table, Mochita, the neighborhood's gossip monarch, would have let something slip. The queen of scandal would have waved her magical grandparent baton and revealed the unknown to us. Surely, this information was a fanciful way for her to discredit my mother, the wrong side of the family. She explained, the rumor was that he was born with a birth defect. Back in those days, kids like that got placed in homes for the disabled. He's probably still there. I don't think anybody visits. We sat there for a moment longer, after which she seamlessly moved on to discussing the problem of stairwell sanitation. The drunks, you know, they piss on the stairs and nobody cleans it up, she lamented. There were times when Mochita would tell me things about my mother's side of the family, facts or events that were unpleasant and unflattering, but this was new. My mother, flawed though she was as a parent, was resilient. Mochita's distrust for her stemmed from my mother's previous marriage, which bore a daughter with no blood relation to my father's side of the family. My half-sister was an archaeological remnant of their relationship, and she was, as far as Mochita was concerned, an unwanted appendage of a blossoming family tree. It was, as she said, improper. The truth was more complicated. My mother's father died when she was 10. He suffered a brain infarction and left his 2 daughters to survive the Soviet occupation alone. Young, hopeful, and in utter denial, she found it hard to believe her dad was not coming back. Dead men's beards don't grow, yet there they were, shaving his fresh stubble in preparation for the viewing. Even her most desperate bargains with our unrelenting mythological spirits couldn't revive him. I pictured her as a young child, kneeling before Osha, the pagan goddess of the dawn, in the small Catholic cathedral built in earnest reverence for a false prophet. The goddess saw her, a child of only 10, praying for the safe return of her father's soul to Zemina, to earth. Her sorrow burrowed itself into the universe and awoke the deepest regret. In each and every pagan spirit. In that moment, my mother, a child of the cruel and unusual sacrifice of death, swore to become a healer for all the other little girls who had needlessly lost their fathers. She became a neurologist. Whether it was this moment or upon reflection of it that she made her decision is unknown to me. What I know is in her most vulnerable moments to me as her daughter, she spoke about her father's passing. She spoke about her calling to save other children from a premature parental death, and about her journey through medical school as a personal battle against the sacrifices of the pagan gods. Every year, a week before my mother's birthday, the world turns black. She goes to church, which she has gotten out of the habit of doing on most every other occasion. She reminds me to call her mother my other grandmother, which I have gotten out of the habit of doing on most every other occasion. I'll admit, I forget that parents are people too. They're flawed, maimed, and scarred, especially my mother. My family's selective amnesia permeates my relationship with her like the stench of something rancid, something hidden in the air vent that everyone willingly ignores. Maybe Mochita was right. Maybe I did have a brother my mother never told me about, tucked away somewhere in an institution. Maybe he was alive. Maybe he knew things about my mother that I didn't know. But then I realized my mother is someone just as human and fallible as Mochita, whom I have always trusted and revered. As I thought about my brother, this leaf on a withered branch of the family tree, I felt like an intruder into my mother's life. I felt like an intruder on her humanity. I made myself a promise sitting at Mochita's kitchen table. I would forget too, not out of anger or fear or disappointment, but because it was the human thing to do. I would forget because it was the kindest thing to do, to keep things hidden if she needed them to stay hidden. The stubble may still grow on this scandal, but I have lived long enough to know that it must stay dead.
Elvija Ceponyte. Give her a hand, everybody.